Cool. Hi everyone. You've probably guessed it's not Olav, it's the ugly one. It's Chris. We've got to start out. These are Olav's slides, so if you don't like them or anything about this presentation, it's his fault. And if you do like them, that's all down to me. Cool. So yeah, let's just get into it because it's getting late at night now. Last responsible moment. So last responsible moment is kind of a term that's come out of the lean world. Say this is Olav's slide, and it's this idea that we kind of want to defer our commitments. So on the Pop and Dick side, we have that we want to learn as much as we can before we make some irreversible decisions. We don't want to make decisions that will be expensive to change before their time. We don't want to make them after their time. So the thing about last responsible moment is, what is the optimal last responsible moment? And the question mark's there because, as far as we're aware, there's not really a process that Lean defines that you can follow to work out what is the last responsible moment. Now, I'm quite happy to be proven wrong here because my knowledge of Lean isn't as extensive as it perhaps should be, but we're not aware of anything. So in the real options world, we kind of think about two things. First thing we think about is a commitment. So a commitment is something that you have to do, otherwise there will be some kind of cost or penalty associated if you don't do it. This is the opposite to what we consider to be an option. So this is something that we can choose to do. We don't have to do it, we can choose to do it. And so they're pretty important things for us. So the first thing is, what is an option and what is a commitment? So let's consider some examples. A Michael Jackson ticket. I believe that Olav tried to find a Celine Dion ticket, but he couldn't, seeing as he's a big fan. Is it an option or is it a commitment? Well, obviously it's an option. Although we don't behave that way, a ticket is actually an option. However, from the other side, delivering that concert is a commitment that's been made to the fans. Same again, what about an air ticket? Is it an option or is it a commitment? Well, once again, we come to the fact that actually it's an option. It's not actually a commitment. However, on the part of British Airways, who are providing this ticket, it is a commitment. What about children? Now, this is where Olav and I disagree, because Olav thinks that children are a commitment, whereas I think they're an option. And then here we come. This is someone jumping off a cliff. Well, this is obviously a commitment that this guy's made. You know, and the point at which he makes the commitment is kind of when he's left and gravity is in charge. Up until that point, it's an option. But as soon as gravity is in charge, he's no longer in control. It's a commitment. And a locked door. So is a locked door an option or a commitment? Well, a lot depends on whether you've got a key. Now, Olaf Lewitz, who organized the Ale conference in Berlin, told us a great story that when he closes a door, what he does is to make sure that he doesn't forget his keys. He opens the door, he then puts the key in, and he pulls the door closed with his key. And this ensures that he makes sure he's got his key, because if you lose your key, it's a real pain, it's a real commitment that you've made. And this is his way of avoiding making that commitment and ensuring he's got the keys, which then provide him the option to go through the door. So, in options, we have these simple rules, which is options have value, options expire, never commit early unless you know why. So let's kind of go through those one at a time. Options have value. What we're saying here is that an option has value, but we don't know what it is. So whereas financial mathematics and Black-Scholes might tell you an accurate value for an option, in the real world, we don't know what options are worth. If you've got two ways of getting to work, well, we might have a preference to choose one, and the other one we don't really like to use. However, if there's a blockage on the normal route to work, we take the other view. So most of the time, the second route to work is of little value, unless the first route to work is blocked, in which case, all of a sudden, it does have a lot more value. Now, what that does is it informs our behavior so that we try and keep these options open. We don't try to deliberately destroy them, which goes against perceived wisdom, which is if you've got too many options, the complexity overwhelms you, and as a result, it makes things harder. The reality is the opposite. If you've got lots of options, it makes things easier. So options expire. So what we say about this is understand when the option expires. Now, the big difference between financial maths, where all this started, and real options in the real world is, in the real world, most of those options are conditional. So your option to spend a few hours pairing with that guy that you really want to expires when he leaves. Or does it? If you actually create the option to maintain contact with him afterwards, well, you could pair with him afterwards and learn to code with him. But the key thing is that options expire. Sometimes there's a certain point in time after that you no longer have that option, particularly when you've got to achieve tasks for a particular deadline. And then finally, we're kind of big into dogmatic statements, so we say never commit early unless you know why. And so what we're saying here is, if you actually commit early, you're going to destroy options, which destroys value. And don't do that unless you know why, unless you've gathered the information you need to in order to make that commitment. So let's give you some real-world examples and how we can actually change the time at which we have to make the decision, we have to make that commitment, the time at which pushing back, which is the most important thing, so that we've got more time to make a decision before we make that commitment. So a classic example now is the Brittle Key Awards for the Lean SSC. So they had the big conference in California at Long Beach, and they got, I think it was 8 candidates for the award. They got 8 nominees to win the Brittle Key Award. But the hardest thing was actually getting the committee together to make the decision and get them in one room. So what they did was they actually made a winner's trophy for all 8 nominees, and then when they were in the meeting, they decided who was going to win, and they destroyed the other 6. So the 2 winners, they kept the award and destroyed the other 6. Now this goes against conventional wisdom of cost optimization, which would say, well, if it takes 3 weeks to get the award made, we need to make the decision 3 weeks in advance. In actual fact, they created the option to defer that commitment, but it cost them because they had to have the extra award made. But that had huge value because that cost compared to the value of getting them all together to make the decision was much better. Another example is a friend of ours got married, and on her wedding day, because she couldn't choose which shoes she wanted, she got the dress, she was happy with that, but apparently women have this thing about shoes, and on the day of the wedding, she wasn't sure what shoes she wanted, so she ordered 4 pairs, and then on the day of the wedding, she chose the pair she wanted and the ones that felt right for her on the day of the wedding, and she sent the other 3 back. So once again, she's created that option to defer that commitment, to kind of push back that last responsible moment. Now imagine we are going to make a commitment, and so we can do this in the wild, say we're going to jump off this cliff. We may want to consider getting back up again. Now, although this is in the real world, consider how that might be in an IT project. This might be as putting a significant release of software live into production. So what's our consideration? Well, if we're going to jump off a cliff like that, we might want to have some rope to climb back up. And the most important consideration is time. So how much time do we have to get back up the cliff? So if we've got a month, well, that's probably because we've got food and that will run out in a month if we jumped off the cliff. In IT projects, we might do the release, and then it might be on a system where they only need it once a month. So they only need it at the end of the month, and there are a lot of examples of like this in finance and in the finance aspects where they do monthly accounts. So the key thing here is how long can you survive versus how long will it take you to recover the situation. And so forget about the probabilities and stuff, just if the time it takes you to recover is less than the time that you've got to survive, then you're okay. But if the time it takes to recover is greater than the time it takes to survive, then you've got a problem and you need to start investigating some options to speed that up. So in a month, it's quite easy. Now consider a day. Perhaps you injured yourself jumping off that cliff, and you've got a day to get it back up the cliff. You may be working on a system where you've got a day to recover. The way that you approach this might be slightly different now. So whereas if you've got a month, you might have time to fix the problem you've introduced into production. If you're talking about a day, you might be able to fix it, or you may have to roll back. So you need to consider, how long will it take us to roll back? Can we roll back in a day? And there are many options at this point. But what if it's an hour? What if lava is coming down the hill, and if we're not out of the way in an hour, we're going to be burnt to death? Well, in the real world of IT, there are many situations where an hour would be as long as we want to be without the system. Perhaps it's the operational system in a bank. You know, perhaps it's the performance of British Bank of America's cash till network. But now it's getting serious. What about a minute? So if it's in a minute, yeah, we've got to think through our strategy. So now if it's a minute, we need to roll back. We may want to have a hot standby database. So it has an impact. We need to have all these different options to do this. Now if you look at this cat has got all the options there. It's resting so that it can run fast when it spots the prey it wants. It's found a great place to go and look for the prey, so it's got better vision. So this is the posture of your fiercest predator, which is one of resting while watching what's going on. A predator that's running around in the field is less of a problem because it's wearing itself out, and some IT managers might want to think carefully about that and what it means for their team. And so then we've got a second. If we've only got a second to recover from a problem, then we really need to kind of think things through a very different approach. So here we're perhaps thinking of the way that websites are now deploying into production changes on just a few of their servers so they can monitor the performance before they roll them out to the entire system. So that, once again, we can roll back, because that's the thing. We may want to fix things, or we may want to roll back. And once again, when we're doing that rollback, the question is, can we roll back quicker than the system can survive for? The business can survive without the system. So, to come back to the real option rules, so we have options have value. So as a result, we just don't know what it is. So as a result, we want to avoid destroying options unnecessary, really. They expire, and understanding when our options expire is probably one of the most powerful things we can do. And this takes a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of information to actually work that out sometimes. And then never commit early unless you know why. That's like the first, it's something that guides our behavior. So, to determine the last responsible moment, here's the kind of recipe. This is the Jamie Oliver response to real options. First, identify the options that are available. 2, identify the last point at which decisions can be made. 3, until expiry date, look for new options. 4, attempt to push back the decision time. 5, understand that cost optimization is not the same as revenue optimization or risk reduction. Don't reduce costs such that you destroy revenue optimization or risk reduction. And wait to make the commitment. And wait until the conditions are perfect, till the meetings are correct. And then when you do need to make a commitment, act. And do so as quickly as possible. And think about the lion up the tree. The way it was able to respond quickly is by resting. So, one last thought. There is no last responsible moment. There are last responsible moments. There are lots of them because there are lots of options in the way that we achieve our goals. Thank you. I'm Olaf Marson, and if you didn't like this presentation, you should send all of your complaints to this email address. And I think that's it. So, Pascal?